the Charlie Brown Christmas, the soundtrack was a jazz soundtrack. Do you remember that? There was no really Christmas, it was all jazz. In 1965, Coca-Cola agreed to sponsor this, and CBS agreed to air. For you young people, back then, we only had 3 networks. It's CBS, ABC, NBC, and if you could move your TV antenna the right way, you could get PBS, you know. So those were basically the 4 things, right? And so CBS hated the jazz soundtrack. I said, where's the Christmas music? Where is all this background that's supposed to be? And Charles Schulz, the creator of the Peanuts comic strip, said, just trust us. We got this new guy, Gerald Daldy, I think. And he had a trio. And if you remember that opening scene where the kids are skating and they're singing Christmas Time, he actually wrote that in about 2 hours just for this special. But CBS hated it. And so lesson number 1, and of course this is personal because I love jazz. I absolutely love jazz. I've been to the Montreal Jazz Festival. I just love the old stuff. I play Miles Davis, Kind of Blue, repeatedly, to where my youngest son now loves Miles Davis, trying to get him onto John Coltrane and all the classics. But you know, if you think about it, jazz is kind of like our metaphysical gifts, and we all have metaphysical gifts, right? The reason I love jazz is because when Miles Davis sat down to record Kind of Blue, he only gave him about 4 notes to do it, and they created one of the most beautiful classic jazz albums of all time. And that's why I think jazz is kind of like our metaphysical gifts. There's no borders, there's no boundaries. Jazz breathes. There's no limits on jazz. You know, when you see jazz musicians just sitting in, it's just one of the most beautiful things. So I think our metaphysical gifts are like that. But I think sometimes we put labels on things, right? We put labels on a gift. Either that one's, I may step on toes here, so I hope that's okay. Either that person's a medium, or that person's psychic, or that person's clairvoyant. And I gotta tell you, you know, things that, and a lot of people don't understand jazz, and I get it. You know, it just sounds like 7 drunk musicians just beating stuff. And to me, it's beautiful. To my wife, it's like, you know, fingernails on a chalkboard, right? That's why I can't play jazz at the house anymore. I go out in my car and I listen to my jazz. But think about things that we don't understand, we separate ourselves from. And then things we separate ourselves from, we kind of fear. Then the things we fear, we attach labels and ideology to it. And so I think our metaphysical gifts are like jazz. And I think a lot of times, you know, we always say, this is, I think, a dangerous trap for all of us here with metaphysical gifts. We always say everybody works differently, but then we kind of point out people that don't work the way that we do, or don't do the things that we think they should be doing, and we start attacking them. That's not what the universe wants. The universe wants us to, if we're a unitive, or we're all connected, I think as Spirit once told me, we better start acting like it, you know? And so those metaphysical gifts that you all have, that we all have, embrace those and see where it leads you to. That's lesson number 1. Lesson number 2, CBS, when they were putting Charlie Brown Christmas together, CBS said, okay, so who are the adult voiceover actors that you're going to use for this? Charles said, we're not. They're children. We're going to use children. And CBS said, that's a huge mistake. Don't do that. They used children. If you remember Charlie Brown's sister, Sally, everybody remember Sally? In the Charlie Brown Christmas, she was so young, she didn't know how to read. So they had to feed her the lines that she would record. The young man that did Linus was 10 years old at the time. So it's unconventional, and that's what Charles Schulz was trying to tell him. If we're going to talk about Christmas or something spiritual and special from a child's point of view, it's got to be children doing the voiceovers. CBS flipped. So now we have this whole list of all these adult, you know, voiceover actors who can talk like children. And Charles and then Schulz said, no, we're not going to do it. So the lesson for me, and I might as well tell you, don't think I'm going to burn, but I am Catholic, right? So I'm still Catholic and a Christian. Don't think I'm going to burn. But if you remember anything about the Bible, anything that Jesus, and this is not going to be a Jesus thing, but anything Jesus talked about was be like children, right? Because there's an innocence to children. There's a simplicity to children. That's why children are so sensitive to spirit. They don't have the filters. They don't have the boundaries. They don't have everything society has put on them and said, you don't have an imaginary friend, or you're not seeing that. You just have an imaginary friend. You're just making it up. You're just trying to get attention. And so my lesson for me, my wife says this is the one I know the best, is act like a child. That's what my wife says I do. I act like a child, which is true. It's sad, but true. But that's me.
Thank God.
Yeah. So think of children, innocent, loving, caring, nurturing. They depend upon a greater thing to teach them. And so I think lesson number 2 for me was, even as I use these gifts, be innocent with them, be nurturing, be caring, knowing that all of what we do with our metaphysical gifts, these are people's souls we're talking about. And so we have to be nurturing and caring, right? That's lesson number 2. Hey, I am flying through this, which means, I don't know, you guys get out of here early, or there's more time for you to contribute more money. I don't know, that one. So if you look at a Charlie Brown Christmas, does anybody remember the one theme of a Charlie Brown Christmas? Anybody?
Yeah, the Christmas tree.
The Christmas tree.
Yeah.
But the underlying theme is,
What it meant.
what was it critical of?
Yeah, that little kid.
It was critical of the commercialism.
Yeah.
That was the whole idea behind a Charlie Brown Christmas. In fact, I just watched the opening scene, and Charlie Brown is walking out of the house with Linus, and he said, "Christmas is coming. I don't feel anything." CBS flipped over that. Okay. Here is a network television which depends upon commercials and advertising, and you're going to put on a cartoon, a special, which is critical of the commercialism of Christmas, right? So that was one of the things. The other thing, if you think about it, now looking back and you talk to the people who created this, one of the themes that CBS really pushed back was there was an underlying thing about depression, if you think about it. Of a child being depressed, that Christmas was coming and he felt nothing. And everything he did around the holiday time was for naught, right? So there was that theme. They didn't like that one. And the other thing with CBS on this was, if you looked at the language that the kids use, it was really proper English. It was really, I was going to write down 2 lines that Charlie Brown said, and it was just like a Harvard professor said it. But that was on purpose. That was to show not the children as just goofy kids, but to show the children as intelligent, that they knew what was going on. So you look at all that, you look at the theme, and also in that there was a risk, because by now CBS was really pretty upset with Charles Schultz. They were upset at Bill Melendez, the director, and they were really upset at Mendelsohn, who put all the TV specials together. In fact, at one point, Mendelsohn said, "I think this is career killer. We're all going to be, we're all going to be killed, right, in terms of our career." Melendez said, at the end of everything, I thought we had killed Peanuts forever. And I thought I was going to be one of the ones who killed Peanuts, right? So lesson number 3 for me, though, is metaphysical gifts come in as risk, right? But it's only a risk if you use the metaphysical gifts, if you use them. If you keep the gifts within you, then there's nothing to risk. Unlike a lot of you, I didn't discover my metaphysical gifts early on, at an early age, right? Wasn't 10 years old, wasn't 15, it's my mid-50s, and I'm 63, right? So I've been in this metaphysical world, thanks to a lot of people in this room, for about 6 or 7 years. And in the beginning, I was cautious, because people who had known me all my life were going, with my unique, as Mary says, but warped at times, sense of humor, people thought I was kidding when I said, "Here's what I discovered," and they go, "Oh, well, that's a good one. Where would you like to go eat lunch, Jerry? No, this is really what I'm about. No, yeah, it's really good. It's a good one. So finally, when I stepped out to use these gifts in the way that I think God wants me to, universe wants me to, spirit wants me to, there comes a risk. I've talked about it. It's been a risk within my own family, my own immediate family. There's been risk within friends and acquaintances. I've alienated people. There's been risk within my own Catholic Church. Someone says, the Catholic Church really embraced what you do, and I went, no, not exactly. How many? I'm not even going to ask for a show of hands. How many people used to be Catholic? I think the wind would probably knock me down. I do love Teresa Caputo's line about the Catholic Church, because she's still Catholic. She said the Catholic Church doesn't believe in what she does, but they've yet to return the big check she writes them every year. Only difference is Jerry doesn't write him a big check. Mary won't let me. So think of it this way. We all have these metaphysical gifts, right? And they come out, and we use them whenever Spirit says it's time to come out. Right? As I read one time, ships are safe in the harbor, but that's not what ships are made for. Ships are made to set sail. And doing this risk reminds me of, I retired last year from a career in account management with a major company. And so I used to read all the business books, right? I used to think there was a business book out there I just had to get my hands on. Little did I know, seriously, that most of them are basically saying the same thing, but they just say it different ways. But there's one business book that stood out and still stands out today. It's called First Break All the Rules. And it's a survey of 300, business leaders and executives. 300 to 400, anyway. And they did a survey over a 3-year period. And one of the questions they asked is, what do you think you did wrong? In all your years as a CEO, as an executive, as a leader, what do you think went wrong? What do you think? You've told us about things you did right. Tell us about some things that you wish you could go back and correct. And one of the things that was popping up on everybody's response was this. They realized, unfortunately, years later, they spent more time trying to shove in stuff into people that they felt was left out, instead of spending all that time pulling all the great stuff out of people that was already in. They looked at their people and they said, oh, you're missing this, you're missing this, you're missing this. They spent all their time, all their energy trying to put all that stuff, and never looked at the person and said, well, maybe they're talented in other ways, and we just don't know it. So taking a risk involves recognizing the power in other people, empowering people on their path. So that was lesson number 3 for you. We're in the home stretch, folks. So here was lesson number 4. CBS looked at him and said, okay, so what's this special about? This special is about a Christmas tree. And you're right, that's really what it started about, was a Christmas tree. Then what else are you going to do? Well, we're going to tell the story of the birth of Christ. And they went, excuse me? You're going to do what? Oh, yeah, with children, with a cartoon. And they go, oh, no, we don't think so. So the pressure was on them to change the whole thing, to change the whole concept, to change everything. So Bill Mendelsohn went to Charles Schultz, creator of Peanuts, and said, we got to change it. It's not going to work. Coca-Cola is going to pull out of the sponsorship. CBS is not going to allow us to do this. Schultz says, no, it's this or it's nothing. Because if we don't tell the story this way, through the eyes of children, right, then who's going to tell it, right? So they came back and they said it was too religious. And I do think at times, back then, religion and spirituality was the same, right? They just kind of, Eastern religion was entirely different than Western religion. Once Western religion got a hold of Eastern religion, we kind of changed it in what some people call the transactional church. You got a problem, and you may not know that you have a problem, but you got a problem, and I got a solution, so you got to come to me. So that's a transactional type church. And so they said, no, we're going to tell the story the way it needs to be told. And oh, by the way, we're going to quote from the Bible. CBS went, I don't think so. Oh yeah, we're going to quote from Luke's gospel. And so Bill Mendelsohn went back to Charles Schultz again and said, this could be it for us. Schultz says, fine. I'll go back to writing. I'll go back to doing just the cartoon, the comic strip. So what's my lesson that I've learned? You can be too religious, I guess, but you can't be too spiritual. I read on Facebook one time, spirituality is divine and religion tends at times to border on crowd control, if you think about it. It's been told to me through the circle that I attended and through others, and the messages come to me, that one of the reasons I remain a Catholic is to try to enlighten Catholics about these gifts. It's not been a fun journey. It's been a little bit of pushback. Let me just tell you. St. Stephen's, where I go, they actually had a winter fest, and they were looking for donations. And I just went, let me donate a couple of books and a free reading. And I went, this will never see the light of day. They'll probably be out burning it and stomping on it, But it passed. It passed. I don't know how it passed, but it passed.
Wow.
I know. It probably won't next year. They're probably on to me now, but I think that's what I love about the mission statement. I call it a mission statement, whatever it is that guides open arms. It was just so beautiful. I mean, that should be on a little laminated. That should remind us that we are all connected. That at times, I talk about, and I'll talk about this here. Well, I'll talk about this here. But anyway, but that this unitive consciousness, this soul, everything is connected. When someone does something horrific in Uganda, we all suffer, because we're all connected. If we're all connected, then we got to help, right? So lesson number 4 was for me is you can be too religious, but not too spiritual. Lesson number 5, Linus. So we all know what Linus did, right? He carries a security blanket, right? I never noticed this in a Charlie Brown Christmas. I've probably seen it, 15, 20 times. When Charlie Brown's on stage and the tree, that he's trying to do, and he doesn't understand, it's before the tree, but he doesn't understand what Christmas is all about. Linus says, I do, and the lights dim, and he starts quoting from Luke's gospel. When he gets to the point, and the angel said, fear not, he does the unthinkable. He drops his security blanket. And he's before never seen dropping his security blanket until he quotes that. And so when we look at security blankets, what is some of our security blankets? Well, when I first really started discovering the metaphysical gifts, my security blanket was the Bible. I figured I could fall back on that. That hasn't really worked out too well so far, but that's okay. I'm working through it. Catholicism, I just talked about that. But my biggest security blanket was my analytical brain. It's how I'm wired, And Spirit has really worked hard at rewiring my analytical brain, and there's still 3%, 5% going, nah, you didn't talk to someone who just passed 20 years ago. That you're just crazy, Jerry. That's just all there is. And so I'm still working that, but we all have security blankets that we hold on to, right? So comes the day, they got a Charlie Brown Christmas, right? They got it all set, ready to go. They're showing the final thing to CBS. In the boardroom is CBS, Coca-Cola, Charles Schultz, Mendelsohn, and Melendez. And they show it, and it gets dead silence, because there's some funny parts in that. I mean, just looking at Snoopy alone is hysterical. They're not laughing. They're not cracking a smile. And it's dead silent. And they said, well, we can't cancel it. If you remember this back then, for those that's old enough, they'd already printed the TV guides. TV guides were printed 2 weeks in advance so they could get it out. So they'd already printed the TV guides, so they couldn't cancel it. They said, we'll run it, but we'll never run it again. This is potentially one of the biggest flops in the history of CBS. And so they walked out of there thinking, that's it. This is our career. This is our future. This is our livelihood. So in December of 1965, I don't know the exact day, but there were, back in that day, there were 30 million TV sets in the United States. Unless you were really, really rich, it was pretty much one TV set per household, right? Just one TV set. That night, when Charlie Brown debuted, almost 16 million TV sets tuned in. 50% of the TV sets in the United States of America tuned in to watch this. And of course, it's an instant classic. So my final thought, my final thought is, you know, there's a saying that I hear voices. No, I'm just kidding. Stop it. And they're moving around. I'm just kidding. You know, I used to work these Christian leadership retreats in Catholicism, worked them for 30 years. I no longer get to serve on the teams because Jerry's gone rogue, right? But we used to have a saying in there. We used to say, "You may be the only Bible that someone ever reads," right? And that was a very powerful statement. So I'm going to twist that a little bit and say, think about it. You may be the only visibility and awareness of metaphysical gifts that someone will ever run into. You know? So the final question is, you know, where the Peanuts people had a story to tell. What will be your story? What will be my story? Who will we tell it to? And how will we convey that we are all gifted people on this earth? Thank you for listening. God bless. Peace.